She was hired just to clean the mansion of a lonely widower. He made her take on the role of a dead mother, just to bring speech back to his mute son. If you enjoy stories of love and romance, watch until the end. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're listening from. Stay tuned. The cutting wind from the Texas hills carried the sweet aroma of ripe grapes, but also something darker, the weight of secrets buried 7 years ago. The Sullivan mansion stood majestically among the vineyards, its dark stones absorbing the golden light of dusk, as if they could devour even hope itself. Iris Light held the worn strap of her bag with enough force to whiten her knuckles. At 31, she had learned to expect nothing from life, but there, standing before that imposing structure, she felt a strange shiver run down her spine. The woman who received her at the side entrance was small and nervous, with grey hair pulled back in a tight bun. Mrs. Martha, the housekeeper, spoke too quickly, as if eager to be done with the conversation. "You know things are different here, right, miss? Mr. Ethan doesn't like noise, the boy hardly speaks, and there are rules that cannot be broken." Iris merely nodded, accustomed to difficult employers and temporary jobs, but there was something in Martha's tone, a disguised urgency that made her pay more attention. When they entered the kitchen, Iris smelled the familiar scent of polished wood and cleaning products, but also something more subtle, a persistent floral fragrance, as if someone had sprayed perfume in the corners and it refused to completely disappear. "What perfume is that?" she asked without thinking. Martha froze for a few seconds before answering. "There's no perfume here." "Must be your imagination." But Iris knew how to recognize lies. She had grown up surrounded by them. The first floor of the mansion was a maze of wide corridors, old portraits, and furniture covered with white cloths. Each of Iris's steps echoed in the sepulchral silence, and she began to understand why Martha had mentioned that the master didn't like noise. It was as if the entire house held its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen at any moment. "The boy's room is over there," said Martha, pointing to a partially open door at the end of the corridor. "But be careful. He doesn't like strangers." Iris approached slowly, gently pushing the door. Liam's room was spacious and filled with expensive toys, but there was a palpable sadness in the air, as if even the most elaborate gifts couldn't disguise the loneliness that inhabited that space. The boy was sitting on the floor, with his back to the door, building something with colorful blocks. His dark hair was just like his father's, but his small shoulders carried a rigidity that shouldn't exist in a 6-year-old child. When Iris entered, Liam didn't turn around. She knelt a few meters behind him, watching in silence. The boy was building a house, or perhaps a fortress, with high walls and only a small opening. Iris recognized the architecture of solitude because she had built one just like it inside herself years ago, when she lost the child she never got to know. "It's a beautiful house," she said softly. Liam stopped moving his hands, but didn't respond. Iris remained there, motionless, until one of the blocks rolled beyond the boy's reach. Instinctively, she approached and picked it up, extending it toward him. Liam turned around for the first time. His eyes were dark like his father's, but carried a vulnerability that made Iris's heart contract. Slowly, very slowly, he extended his small hand and touched her face. "Mommy," he whispered, and the word echoed through the room like an answered prayer. Outside, hidden in the shadows of the corridor, Ethan Sullivan observed the scene with clenched fists. He had hired dozens of nannies, therapists, caregivers. All had failed to make Liam utter a single word. And now a housekeeper with no references had accomplished the impossible in a matter of minutes. But it wasn't just that which disturbed him. It was the way Iris had moved through the room, the naturalness with which she had knelt beside his son, as if she belonged in that place, as if she had always belonged. Ethan retreated down the corridors, the sound of his footsteps muffled by the Persian carpet. At 46, he had learned to control every emotion, to calculate every movement, to never show weakness. But Iris Light had destroyed all that balance in a matter of seconds, and that frightened him more than he was willing to admit. That night, as rain began to drum against the windows of the mansion, Ethan remained awake until dawn, thinking about the woman who had arrived like a silent storm to transform everything he had built upon the ruins of his life. Dawn arrived grey over the vineyards, but inside the Sullivan mansion something had changed. Iris woke up in the small servants' room with the strange sensation that her life had taken an irreversible turn. For the first time in years, she had dreamed of the son she had lost, not a nightmare, but a sweet memory of what could have been. Liam's face blended with the images of the baby she had never known, and upon waking, she felt divided between the old pain and a dangerous hope. When she went down to the kitchen, she found Martha preparing breakfast with mechanical movements. The housekeeper avoided her gaze, but Iris noticed the tension in her shoulders. "Did you sleep well?" Martha asked without raising her eyes from the frying pan. "Yes, thank you." Iris served herself coffee and sat at the small table reserved for the staff. The silence was dense, interrupted only by the sizzle of oil in the pan and the distant sound of Ethan's heavy footsteps on the floor above. "He wants to talk to you," Martha said suddenly, still with her back turned. "After breakfast, go to his office. But remember what I said yesterday, things are different here." There was a tone of warning in the older woman's voice, as if she wanted to protect Iris from something terrible, but didn't know how. Iris finished her coffee in silence, washed her cup and climbed the stairs with her heart beating faster than she would like to admit. Ethan's office was on the second floor, behind a solid wooden door that seemed to guard centuries-old secrets. Iris knocked lightly and waited. "Come in." The voice was deep, controlled, but there was an underlying tension that she managed to detect. When she pushed the door, she found Ethan standing in front of a huge window overlooking the vineyards. He didn't turn immediately, and she was able to observe him for a few seconds. The broad shoulders, the erect posture, the way his fingers drummed against the window glass. "Sit down," he said, finally turning around. In the daylight, Ethan Sullivan was even more intimidating than Iris had imagined. His features were marked, as if they had been sculpted by pain, and his eyes were the kind that seemed to read people's thoughts. She sat in the chair in front of the desk, maintaining an upright posture despite her nervousness. "Yesterday was your first day here," he began, walking slowly around the desk. "And my son spoke." Iris didn't respond, just watched him. There was something predatory in the way he moved, like a feline studying its prey. "Do you know how many people have tried to make Liam talk in the last 3 years? Therapists with diplomas from the best universities, renowned child psychologists, even a medium that my sister-in-law insisted on bringing." He stopped in front of her, resting his hands on the desk. "All failed. And you succeeded in 15 minutes. It wasn't planned," said Iris, finding her voice. "I just was there." Ethan smiled, but there was no warmth in the gesture. "Exactly. You were there, like a mother would be." He moved away from the desk, heading to a bookshelf full of books and documents. "I need to make you a proposal, Iris Light. A proposal that could change your life forever." Iris felt a shiver run down her spine. There was something in the way he pronounced her name that made her feel exposed, vulnerable. "What kind of proposal?" Ethan removed a folder from the shelf and opened it on the desk. Inside were documents, photographs, and what appeared to be a contract. "I want you to be Liam's mother. Not just a nanny or caregiver. I want you to assume the role completely." The silence that followed was deafening. Iris looked at the documents without being able to process what she was hearing. "I don't understand," she finally said. Ethan sat behind the desk, his fingers interlaced. "Liam needs a maternal figure, and you, from what I could observe, need stability. It's a fair exchange." He pushed the papers toward her. "In exchange, you'll have an entire wing of the mansion just for you, a salary that will secure your future, complete security." Iris flipped through the documents with trembling hands. The numbers were astronomical, more money than she had ever seen in her life. But there was something disturbing about the proposal, a coldness that made her feel as if she were being bought. "And what exactly do you expect from me?" Ethan leaned forward, his eyes fixed on hers. "That you be a dedicated mother to Liam. That you participate in family events as if you were my wife. That you keep up appearances." "Your wife?" The question came out sharper than Iris had intended. "In the eyes of the world, yes, but don't worry. I don't expect anything intimate from you. We'll have separate rooms, separate lives. It's just a performance." He paused, studying her reaction. "Naturally, there are rules. You can't get romantically involved with other people. You can't leave without my permission, and you can't question certain decisions of mine." Iris stood up abruptly, the chair creaking against the wooden floor. "You're asking me to sell my life." Ethan remained impassive. "I'm offering a new life. A life where you'll never have to worry about money again, where you'll have a secure roof over your head, where you'll be respected and valued." He paused. "And where you can be the mother you always wanted to be." The words hit Iris like a punch to the stomach. How did he know about her past? About the loss that had haunted her for 13 years? She stared at him, looking for signs that he was bluffing, but found only that calculating calmness that seemed to be his trademark. "How did you—" "I always research the people who work for me," he said simply. "I know about the baby you lost. I know about your loneliness, and I know that you need this as much as Liam needs you." Iris felt tears burn her eyes, but refused to let them fall. There was something cruel in the way Ethan used her pain against her, but there was also an inevitable truth in his words. She really did need this. And Liam. Liam had called her mommy with a need that echoed her own. "I need to think," she said, heading for the door. "You have until tomorrow," Ethan replied. "After that, the offer expires." When Iris left the office, her legs were shaking. There was something deeply wrong with that proposal, but also something irresistibly tempting. As she walked through the corridors of the mansion, she heard the sound of small footsteps. Liam appeared at the end of the corridor, carrying one of the toys he had been building the day before. He approached her slowly and extended the toy, a small wooden horse. "For you," he said in a soft voice. And at that moment, Iris knew her decision was already made. 3 weeks had passed since Iris signed the contract, and the Sullivan mansion breathed differently. What was once a silent mausoleum now echoed with sounds that hadn't been heard for years. Liam's crystalline laughter as he played in the garden, the noise of pans in the kitchen when Iris made cookies, the soft sound of her voice singing lullabies that made even the oldest employees stop to listen. It was as if the house had awakened from a deep and painful sleep. Iris had moved to the east wing of the mansion, a set of 3 rooms decorated with a discreet luxury that she had never experienced before. But what impressed her most wasn't the expensive furniture or the huge windows overlooking the vineyards. It was the sense of belonging that grew inside her every day. Liam sought her out constantly, held her hand during meals, slept better when she sang to him before bedtime. And she, who had spent 13 years avoiding any kind of emotional bond, found herself diving headfirst into that unlikely motherhood. In the kitchen, Martha observed the transformation with a mixture of relief and concern. "I've never seen the boy so happy," she commented while helping Iris prepare lunch. "But Mr. Ethan, he's different too, more restless." Iris paused the movement of the knife over the vegetables. She had noticed this too. Ethan observed her constantly, not in an obvious way, but she felt his gaze on her back when she played with Liam in the garden, noticed his presence in the shadows of the corridors when she sang to the boy before sleep. "Has he always been like this?" asked Iris, trying to sound casual. Martha hesitated before answering. After Mrs. Amanda disappeared, he closed himself off completely. Didn't talk to anyone beyond what was necessary, spent days locked in his office, but now— She made a significant pause. "Now he watches you and the boy, as if he's trying to understand something, as if you were a puzzle he can't solve." That afternoon, Iris was in the garden with Liam when she heard footsteps on the grass behind her. She didn't need to turn to know it was Ethan. There was something in the cadence of his steps that she could already recognize. "Mommy, look!" shouted Liam, running toward his father with a drawing in his hands. "I drew our family." Iris felt her heart accelerate. It was the first time Liam had called Ethan Daddy in front of her. Ethan knelt to be at his son's height, studying the drawing carefully. Iris approached slowly and saw 3 figures drawn with crayon, a tall, dark man, a brown-haired woman, and a small boy in the middle, all holding hands. It was an image of domestic happiness that made something ache inside Iris's chest. "It's very beautiful," said Ethan, his voice softer than she was used to hearing. "Can we hang it on the refrigerator?" While Liam ran back to the house, Ethan and Iris were left alone in the garden. The silence between them was dense, charged with a tension that she couldn't name. "He's happy," Ethan finally said, without taking his eyes off the drawing. "Yes, he is," replied Iris. "You seem different too," he continued, finally looking at her. "More present. As if you've found your place." Iris crossed her arms, uncomfortable with the intensity of his gaze. "It's easier than I imagined, being his mother." The words came out before she could filter them, and she immediately regretted it. There was a vulnerability in this confession that she hadn't intended to share. Ethan took a step closer, and she could smell his cologne, something woody and masculine that made her head spin. "Iris," he said, and there was something different in his voice, lower, more intimate. "I need to ask you something." She looked at him, waiting. "Tomorrow night there's a business dinner, important businessmen, some family members. You'll need to be there." "As my wife." The word wife hung in the air between them like a dangerous promise. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," admitted Iris. The idea of pretending to be Ethan's wife in front of strangers terrified her. "You will be," he said with a confidence she didn't feel. "There will be a dress in your room tomorrow and jewelry. Everything you need." He took another step closer, and Iris could see the small lines around his eyes, marks of sleepless nights and old worries. "Ethan," she began, but he interrupted her. "I know it's not easy, this situation, but you're saving my son, and I'll never forget that." There was genuine gratitude in his voice, but also something more. Something that made Iris's stomach contract in a way she preferred not to analyze too deeply. That night, Iris was in her room leafing through the book she had found in the library, a collection of poetry, when she heard a soft knock on the door. "Come in," she said, expecting to see Liam or perhaps Martha. But it was Ethan who appeared in the doorway, holding a steaming cup of tea. "I thought you might want this," he said, entering her room for the first time since she had moved there. Iris accepted the cup, her hands brushing against his for an instant. His skin was warm, rough, and the touch sent a wave of heat up her arm. "Chamomile," he explained, "helps you sleep." They stayed there for a moment, she sitting in the armchair by the window, he standing a few meters away. The intimacy of the situation, him in her room, her in a nightgown, the soft light of the lamp creating shadows on their faces, was disturbing and exciting at the same time. "Ethan," she finally said, "why me? Of all the women you could have chosen, why me?" He remained silent for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a whisper. "Because you don't want anything from me. All the others wanted something, money, status, access to my family. But you're here for Liam, and maybe that's what I need. Someone who is here for the right reasons." Iris drank the tea slowly, savoring the mild taste of chamomile. "And if I start to want something from you?" The question came out bolder than she had intended, and she saw something move in his eyes, a small but intense flame. "Then," he said, heading for the door, "we'll have a problem." But when he looked at her one last time before leaving, Iris had the impression that he didn't see this as a problem. Perhaps it was exactly what he had been waiting to happen. The dress that Ethan had chosen for Iris was a deep blue, almost black, that highlighted her brown eyes and fit perfectly to her curves. When she looked at herself in the bedroom mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The pearl necklace around her neck, the discreet but expensive earrings, the hair pulled back in an elegant bun, everything conspired to transform her into someone she had never been. A high society lady, Ethan Sullivan's wife. When she descended the stairs to meet him in the main hall, Iris saw something change in his gaze. Ethan was impeccable in his dark suit, but when he saw her he froze for a few seconds, as if seeing a ghost. "You look," he began, but didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he offered her his arm. "The guests have already arrived." The mansion's dining room had been transformed for the occasion. Candles created an intimate atmosphere. Fresh flowers adorned the mahogany table, and the aroma of an elaborate dinner floated in the air. Iris counted 8 people besides her and Ethan, businessmen from the wine sector, their perfectly groomed wives, and 2 men she recognized as being from the Sullivan family, from photographs she had seen around the house. "So allow me to introduce my wife, Iris," said Ethan when they entered the room. The words sounded natural coming from his mouth, as if they had really been married for years. Iris smiled politely as she greeted each person, her hands gently trembling when she shook hands with strangers who studied her with barely disguised curiosity. During dinner, Iris tried to play the role she had accepted. She answered questions about the house, about plans for the vineyards, about raising Liam, but she noticed that some guests observed her with an interest that went beyond courtesy, especially Helen, Ethan's sister-in-law, a woman in her 40s with eyes as sharp as razors. "Iris, dear," said Helen during dessert, her voice too sweet to be sincere. "Ethan told us you met recently. How did you fall in love so quickly?" The silence that followed seemed eternal. Iris felt all eyes on her, especially Ethan's, who maintained a carefully neutral expression. "Sometimes the heart recognizes what the mind takes time to accept," replied Iris, surprising herself with her own poise. "When I met Liam, I immediately knew I belonged to this family." It wasn't exactly a lie, she realized. Helen smiled, but there was no warmth in the gesture. How romantic! And how is Liam handling the change? It must be difficult for a child to accept a new mother. Iris felt Ethan tense beside her. "Liam has adapted wonderfully," she said, keeping her voice firm. "Children are more resilient than we imagine, especially when the new mother looks so much like the previous one," murmured Helen, barely audible, but loud enough for Iris to hear. The comment hit Iris like a slap. She didn't look like Amanda Sullivan. She had seen photographs of the missing woman, and they were physically very different. Amanda was blonde, delicate, while Iris was brunette and more full-figured. Why had Helen said that? Ethan placed his hand over hers, a possessive gesture that didn't go unnoticed by the guests. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur of conversations about business and social gossip. Iris played her role adequately, but couldn't get Helen's comment out of her head. When the guests finally departed, she and Ethan were left alone in the hall, the sound of cars driving away echoing in the night. "You did very well," said Ethan, loosening his tie. "Thank you," replied Iris, but her voice sounded distant. "Ethan, what did Helen mean by that comment about me looking like Amanda?" He stopped undoing the knot of his tie, his fingers freezing on the silk fabric. "Helen was always jealous of Amanda. She says things without thinking." "But I don't look like her," insisted Iris. "I saw the photographs." Ethan stared at her for a long moment before answering. "Not physically, no. But there's something in the way you move through the house, how you interact with Liam, as if—" He stopped, clearly uncomfortable. "As if what?" "As if you had always belonged here." That night, Iris couldn't sleep. Helen's words and Ethan's strange reaction left her restless. At 2 in the morning, she got up and decided to explore parts of the mansion she still didn't know well. She went up to the 3rd floor where the guest rooms and some storage rooms were located. That was when she found the narrow staircase that led to the attic. The door at the top was unlocked, and Iris pushed it slowly. The attic was spacious and dusty, full of covered furniture and old boxes. But what caught her attention was an old wardrobe in the farthest corner, closed with a padlock that seemed too new to have been there for 7 years. Iris looked around until she found a tool she could use to force the padlock. When she finally managed to open it, the wardrobe revealed its secrets: perfectly preserved women's dresses, shoes organized in rows, perfumes that still maintained their fragrance. Amanda Sullivan's clothes kept like sacred relics. Iris touched one of the dresses with reverence. It was made of a soft blue fabric, the same shade she had worn to the dinner. Without really understanding why, she took the dress off the hanger and held it against her own body, looking at herself in the old mirror next to the wardrobe. For a moment, in the dim light coming from the staircase, she could imagine what it would be like to wear that clothing, to live that life. "It suits you." Ethan's voice made her turn abruptly. He was standing at the entrance to the attic, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. There was no anger on his face, no surprise, just a deep sadness and something that could be desire. "I shouldn't be here," said Iris, starting to hang the dress back up. "No," said Ethan, approaching slowly. "Perhaps you should." He stopped in front of her, his hands touching the fabric of the dress she still held. "Amanda wore this dress the last time I saw her. It was the day before her disappearance." His words were laden with a pain that he rarely allowed to show through. Iris stared at him, seeing for the first time the man behind the cold mask he always wore. "Ethan, put it on," he said abruptly. "Put on the dress." "I can't, please." The word came out as a plea, and Iris felt her heart race. There was something wrong with that request, something that should make her run away. But the vulnerability in his eyes, the raw need in his voice made her hesitate. "Turn around," she finally said. Ethan obeyed, and Iris quickly took off her nightgown and put on Amanda's dress. The fabric was soft against her skin, the cut perfect as if it had been made for her. When she finished, she touched Ethan's shoulder for him to turn around. What she saw on his face frightened her. It was as if he were seeing a ghost, but at the same time, as if he were finding something he had long been looking for. Slowly, he approached and touched her face with a reverence that made her stomach contract. "Iris?" he murmured, and then he kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was desperate, hungry, as if he were trying to devour not just her, but all the memories and ghosts she evoked. Iris found herself responding with a passion she didn't know she possessed, her hands getting lost in his hair, her body pressing against his as if they were two parts of a whole finally meeting. When they separated, both were breathless. Ethan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "This is madness," he murmured. "I know," replied Iris, but she didn't move away. They slept together right there in the attic, on an old blanket, surrounded by the ghosts of the past and the dangerous promises of the future. Iris woke up alone in the attic, wrapped in the old blanket and Amanda's lingering perfume that still permeated the blue dress. Morning entered through the small windows, creating beams of golden light that danced on the dust suspended in the air. For a moment, she questioned whether the previous night had been real. Ethan's desperate kiss, the way he had touched her as if she were both salvation and doom. When she went downstairs, she found the house in a silence different from the usual. It wasn't just the morning quietness. There was a palpable tension in the air as if something were about to happen. Martha was in the kitchen, but her movements were more rigid than normal, and she avoided Iris's gaze. "Good morning, Martha. Where's Liam?" "The boy is still sleeping," replied the housekeeper without turning from the sink. "And Mr. Ethan?" The silence that followed was eloquent. Martha finally turned, and Iris saw worry stamped on her wrinkled face. "He left before dawn. Took only a small suitcase. Said he would return, but—" She didn't finish the sentence, but Iris understood. Ethan had fled. After everything that had happened between them, he had simply disappeared. The days that followed were torturous. Liam constantly asked about his father, his dark eyes full of a confusion that broke Iris's heart. She tried to keep him distracted with games and walks through the vineyards, but she felt like an actress playing a role for which she hadn't been adequately prepared. At night, she lay in her empty bed and tried to understand what she had done wrong. A week later, Ethan returned. Iris saw him from her bedroom window, getting out of a dark car with the same small suitcase he had taken. But something had changed in him. His shoulders seemed more hunched, as if he carried an even greater weight, and when he briefly looked in the direction of her window, she saw a coldness in his eyes that wasn't there before. He didn't seek her out. For 3 days, Ethan avoided any contact with Iris beyond what was strictly necessary. He talked to Liam, played with the boy in the garden, but when she approached, he found an excuse to move away. It was as if the night in the attic had never happened, as if they were strangers living in the same house. On the 4th night, Iris couldn't take it anymore. She waited until she was sure Liam was asleep and went to Ethan's office. The door was ajar, and she could see him sitting behind the desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand and a tortured expression on his face. "May I come in?" she asked, knocking lightly on the door. Ethan raised his eyes, and for a moment she saw the cold mask disintegrate, revealing a raw vulnerability that made her want to run to him. But the mask returned almost immediately. "Come in," he said, his voice carefully controlled. Iris closed the door behind her and approached the desk. "We need to talk about what happened." "There's nothing to talk about," replied Ethan, taking a sip of whiskey. "It was a mistake, a moment of weakness that won't be repeated." The words hit Iris like slaps, but she forced herself to remain standing. "A mistake? Is that how you see it?" Ethan finally looked at her, and she saw something move behind his eyes. Pain, desire, fear. "Iris, you don't understand. I'm not a good man. I have things inside me that could hurt you." "What kind of things?" she asked, taking a step closer. Ethan rose abruptly, walking to the window. "Anger. An anger that sometimes I can't control. After she disappeared, I started taking medication to control the outbursts, but sometimes it's not enough." He paused, his fists clenched. "I could hurt you without meaning to, like I might have hurt." He didn't finish the sentence, but Iris understood the implication. "You think you hurt Amanda?" Ethan didn't answer, but his silence was more eloquent than any confession. "That's why you pulled away. You're afraid of hurting me, too." Iris moved closer, ignoring all the alarms going off in her head. "Ethan, look at me." When he turned, she saw unshed tears glistening in his eyes. "I can't stop thinking about you," he said, his voice low and hoarse. Since that night, you're all I see when I close my eyes. And that terrifies me because I don't know if I'm loving you or just using you to replace what I lost." The words hung in the air between them. Iris felt her heart race, not just because of what he had said, but because of the brutal honesty with which he had said it. "And if I say I don't care? Then I'd rather be used by you than live without you." The words came out before she could filter them, and she immediately knew she had crossed a line from which she could not return. Ethan approached her slowly, like a predator circling its prey. "You don't know what you're saying," he murmured, his hands touching her face with a gentleness that contrasted with the intensity of his gaze. "Yes, I do," replied Iris, covering his hands with hers. "I know that Liam needs both of us. I know that this house comes back to life when we're together. And I know that, even if it's madness, I've fallen in love with you." The kiss that followed was different from the first, slower, more deliberate, as if they were sealing a pact that both knew was dangerous. When they separated, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Iris, I need to tell you something about where I was this week." She waited, feeling a chill in her stomach. "I went to Austin. I consulted a specialist, someone to help me understand these episodes of anger." "And what did he say?" "That they are a consequence of unresolved trauma, of the guilt I carry about Amanda's disappearance. He gave me new medication, but also said that I needed to face the truth about what happened that night." Ethan moved away, walking back to the desk. "The truth is that Amanda and I argued, violently. She was trying to leave me, to take Liam away." Iris felt the air leave her lungs. "Why?" "Because she discovered about the medication I was taking, about the episodes of anger. She said she was afraid of me, that she couldn't live like that anymore." Ethan took another sip of whiskey, his hand trembling slightly. "I followed her to the car. I yelled at her. I banged on the car door. She was terrified, Iris. Absolutely terrified of me. And then? Then she drove away and I never saw her again." Ethan finished the glass and placed it on the desk with more force than necessary. "The next day, her car was found abandoned on the road with signs of a collision, but they never found the body. The police questioned me for weeks, but they had no proof. Just suspicions." Iris absorbed the information in silence. Part of her wanted to run, take Liam and leave that house as quickly as possible, but a larger part, a part that she didn't fully understand, wanted to stay, wanted to help this wounded man find peace. "Do you think she's dead?" she finally asked. "I don't know," admitted Ethan, "and that uncertainty is killing me. Because if she's dead, I am responsible. And if she's alive, and why hasn't she come back for Liam?" He stared at her with a vulnerability that left her breathless. "Iris, I need you to know all of this before we decide. Before this between us goes any further. Because I can't promise I won't hurt you. I can only promise I'll try not to." Iris approached him again, her hands touching his chest, feeling the accelerated heart beneath her fingers. "Ethan, we all have demons. We all have things we regret. That doesn't mean we don't deserve love." She paused, carefully choosing her next words. "But I need a promise from you. If you feel you're going to lose control, if the anger starts to take over, you come talk to me, no matter the time, no matter the place. Promise me?" Ethan studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I promise," he said, and then kissed her again, as if he were clinging to the last lifeline in a stormy sea. That night, they slept together for the second time, but this time in his room, surrounded by photographs of Amanda that Iris tried to ignore, knowing she was entering a dangerous territory from which she might never be able to escape. The months that followed brought a strange routine to the Sullivan mansion. During the day, Iris and Ethan maintained appearances, she taking care of Liam, he managing the vineyard business. But at night, when the house fell asleep, they met in secret, exploring a passion that both knew was dangerous. Ethan was an intense lover, almost desperate, as if trying to exorcise ghosts through her body. And Iris gave herself completely, even knowing she was losing herself in a labyrinth from which she might never find her way out. It was Liam who brought the first clue about the past. One afternoon, while they were playing in the garden, the boy ran to the old decorative well that was near the oldest vineyards. "Mommy, look! This is where the other mommy used to hide the letters," he shouted, pointing to a loose stone at the base of the well. Iris felt a shiver run down her spine. "What letters, sweetheart?" Liam stuck his small hand into the opening behind the stone and pulled out an envelope yellowed by humidity. "She said they were letters for when I grew up," he explained, with the innocence of a child who didn't understand the weight of his words. Iris took the envelope with trembling hands. On the back, written in Amanda's delicate handwriting, "For Liam, when he turns 18. That night, after Liam fell asleep, Iris showed the letter to Ethan. He turned pale upon seeing his missing wife's handwriting. "Did you read it?" he asked, his voice tense. "No, it's for Liam." But Ethan was already opening the envelope with hands that trembled almost imperceptibly. "He's only 6 years old. And I need to know what she wrote." The letter was short, but each word seemed to have been chosen with care. "My dear Liam, if you're reading this, it means something happened to me. Your father is not a bad man, but he has a sickness in his soul that makes him lose control. I tried to help him, but I couldn't. If one day you feel that same anger inside you, seek help. Don't let it consume you like it consumed our family. There are more letters hidden in the house. Find them. They contain the truth about everything. I love you forever, Mom." The silence that followed was dense. Ethan carefully folded the letter, his movements too precise, too controlled. "More letters," he murmured. "She hid more letters." Iris observed him, recognizing the signs she had learned to identify, the tension in his shoulders, the hard line of his jaw, the way his hands closed into fists. "Ethan, breathe," she said softly, touching his arm. "She knew," he said, his voice dangerously low. "She knew I was a danger to her, to Liam, and yet she stayed." Why did she stay? The question came out as a roar of pain, and Iris could see the anger beginning to take hold of him. "Because she loved you," she replied, keeping her voice calm. "Because sometimes love makes us make decisions that aren't rational." Ethan stood up abruptly, walking to the window. "I need to find these letters," he said. "I need to know what else she wrote." Iris approached him slowly. "Then let's look. Together." She touched his back, feeling the tension of the muscles under her hand. "But not today. Today you need to calm down." They spent the night awake, Iris humming softly while massaging Ethan's tense shoulders, until he finally relaxed in her arms. But the next day, they began the search. They looked in every corner of the mansion, behind paintings, inside books, in secret drawers of old furniture. It was Iris who found the second letter, hidden behind the mirror in the master bathroom. This letter was different, more personal and disturbing. Today Ethan had another episode. Broke all the dishes in the kitchen because Liam was crying and he couldn't make the boy stop. Afterwards, he sat on the floor and cried like a child, said he didn't want to be like his father, that he had promised himself he would be different. I'm beginning to understand that this anger comes from very far back, from wounds he never managed to heal. The third letter was hidden in the library, between the pages of a book of poetry that Iris recognized as being the same one she had read in her room. "I discovered something terrible today. I found medication in Ethan's office, medicine he's been taking in secret for years. When I confronted him, he exploded, yelled at me, said I didn't understand anything, that he was trying to control himself for me and for Liam, but I saw the fear in his eyes. He's as afraid of himself as I'm beginning to be of him." The fourth letter was the most difficult to find, hidden in the attic, in the same wardrobe where Iris had found Amanda's dresses. "Ethan followed me today when I went to town. He waited outside the doctor's office as if he thought I was going to run away. When I returned home, he was distraught. Said he can't live without me, but he also can't live with me. I'm pregnant again, but I don't know if I should tell him. I don't know if it's safe." This last revelation hit Iris like a punch to the stomach. Amanda was pregnant when she disappeared. That meant there was more at stake that last night than Ethan had told her. When she showed the letter to him, she saw his mask of control shatter completely. "Pregnant," he murmured, his hands trembling. "She was pregnant and didn't tell me." "Maybe she was afraid of your reaction," Iris suggested gently. But Ethan was lost in his own memories. "The night she disappeared, she tried to tell me something. I was so furious that I didn't listen. My God, what if she was trying to tell me about the baby?" He sat heavily in the armchair, the weight of guilt almost crushing him. Iris knelt before him, taking his hands in hers. "Ethan, you can't blame yourself for something you didn't know." But he wasn't listening. "2 children," he murmured. "I may have lost 2 children that night." The pain in his voice was so intense that Iris felt tears burn her eyes. That's when they heard the sound. a low moan, almost animal, coming from somewhere in the house. Ethan immediately stood up, all muscles tense. "Liam," he said, and they both ran toward the boy's room. But when they got there, they found Liam sleeping deeply, his breathing regular and peaceful. The sound came again, louder this time, clearly coming from the floor below. Ethan grabbed a flashlight and signaled for Iris to stay back, but she followed him anyway. They descended the stairs slowly, both their hearts beating rapidly. The sound seemed to be coming from the wine cellar in the basement of the mansion. When they arrived there, Ethan's flashlight illuminated something that made Iris scream. In the darkest corner of the cellar, there was a broken wine bottle, its dark contents spread across the stone floor. But it wasn't wine that had been inside the bottle. The liquid was too thick, too dark. And stuck to the cork, even after all these years, was something that looked frighteningly like dried blood. Ethan approached slowly, illuminating the bottle better. On the label, in golden letters already faded, was written, "Lady of the Valley, Special Edition for Amanda Sullivan." It was the bottle that Amanda had mentioned in one of her letters, the one created especially for her days before her disappearance. But why was it broken? And what was that dark liquid that wasn't wine? Iris touched Ethan's arm, feeling him tremble. "What does this mean?" she asked, although part of her already knew she didn't want to hear the answer. Ethan illuminated the floor around the bottle better and found something that made both their blood run cold. Small fragments of blue fabric, the same shade as the dress Iris had worn that night in the attic. The dress that Amanda had worn the last time Ethan had seen her alive. The discovery in the cellar changed everything. In the days that followed, Ethan became a dark version of himself, obsessed with understanding the meaning of the broken bottle and the fabric fragments. Iris tried to maintain normalcy for Liam, but the tension in the house was palpable. The boy began to speak less, as if he could feel the emotional storm that was approaching. One morning, while preparing breakfast, Iris noticed Ethan standing at the kitchen window, observing the vineyards with a disturbing intensity. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, gently touching his shoulder. He turned, and she saw that his eyes were red, as if he hadn't slept. "I'm thinking of hiring a private investigator," he said. "Someone who can discover what the police couldn't 7 years ago. Ethan, are you sure you want to dredge up this past?" Iris knew the question was dangerous, but she needed to ask it. "What if we discover something you don't want to know?" He stared at her with an intensity that made her take a step back. "I need to know the truth, Iris. I can't live with these shadows anymore, and I can't build a future with you on the ruins of lies." But before Ethan could make any decision, nature intervened. A violent storm hit the region, with winds reaching more than 60 miles per hour and torrential rain that turned the roads into rivers of mud. The mansion was isolated for 3 days, without electricity and with communications cut off. It was during this storm that Liam began having nightmares. Iris found him screaming in the middle of the second night, cold sweat covering his pale little face. "Mommy," he cried, clinging to her, "the lady in the blue dress is trying to take me away." Iris felt a chill down her spine. "What lady, my love?" "The one who cries in the garden. She says I'm her son, and that she needs to take me away from Daddy." Ethan, who had awakened with his son's screams, was paralyzed at the door of the room. Iris saw the terror in his eyes, not just fear for his son, but the ancestral dread of someone who was beginning to question his own sanity. "It's just a nightmare," she murmured, but even she couldn't put conviction in her voice. On the third day of the storm, when the rain finally stopped and the sun tried to break through the dark clouds, one of the vineyard workers appeared at the mansion door, soaked and agitated. "Mr. Ethan," he said, almost breathless, "you need to come see the North Vineyard. The storm unearthed something." Iris insisted on accompanying Ethan, leaving Liam in Martha's care. They walked through the vineyards, devastated by the storm, branches and leaves scattered everywhere, until they reached the oldest vineyard on the property. There, where the oldest vines had been uprooted by the force of the wind, the soil had given way, revealing something that made Iris's heart stop. Bones. Human, whitened by time, partially exposed by the erosion caused by the torrential rain. And next to the bones, pieces of blue fabric that, even after 7 years buried, still maintained vestiges of their original color. Iris felt her legs weaken and leaned on Ethan, who was as still as a statue, looking at the mortal remains that probably belonged to his wife. "I need to call the police," he said, his voice strangely calm. But when he turned to go back to the house, Iris saw that his hands were trembling uncontrollably. "Ethan, wait," she said, holding his arm. "Before we call the police, I need to tell you something. Something about me that you need to know." They sat on a fallen log far from the bones, but still with them in view. Iris took a deep breath before beginning. "My real name isn't Iris Light," she said. "It's Iris Santos. I changed my name 5 years ago when I was running from someone." Ethan stared at her, waiting for her to continue. "When I said I lost a baby, I didn't tell the whole truth. My son wasn't taken from me by a medical error. He was taken from me. The confession came out like a dammed river that finally breaks the barrier. I was 18 when I got pregnant. The baby's father was the son of a rich family, and when his parents found out about the pregnancy, they offered money for me to disappear. I refused. I wanted to raise my son, even alone." Iris wiped away the tears that began to roll down. "But they didn't accept my refusal." "What did they do?" Ethan's voice was low, dangerous. "They bribed doctors, falsified documents. When my son was born, they said he had died, but I heard him cry, Ethan. I heard my baby cry before they gave me the anesthesia. When I woke up, they told me he had been stillborn, but I knew they were lying." Ethan held her hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Did you try to discover the truth?" "For years. I spent every penny I had hiring investigators, following false leads. I finally discovered that my son had been given to an adoptive family, but when I got there, they had moved. That's when I changed my name and started running from the biological father's family. They were afraid I would cause problems. And now?" "Now." Iris paused, looking at the bones in the vineyard. 3 weeks ago I received a call. A man said he knew where my son was. He said the boy, who is now 13, was in an orphanage in Austin, an orphanage that receives donations from Sullivan Vineyards. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan released her hand slowly, as if he had been slapped. "You think I knew?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "You think all of this was planned?" Iris turned to him, seeing the anger beginning to accumulate in his eyes. "No, Ethan. I swear I didn't think that. I only discovered the connection after I was already here. But why didn't you tell me before?" The question came loaded with pain and distrust. "Because I was afraid you wouldn't believe me. Because I was afraid of losing Liam, of losing you." Iris touched his face, but he moved away. "And because I'm not sure if it's true. It could just be someone trying to take advantage of me." Ethan stood up abruptly, walking a few steps before turning to her. "Iris, do you realize what this means? If your son is really alive, if there's a connection between my family and what happened to you, this changes everything." He ran his hands through his hair, clearly distressed. "It means that maybe nothing we lived was real. Maybe you only got close to me to discover the truth about your son." "That's not true," said Iris, standing up too. "What I feel for you, for Liam, is real. More real than anything I've ever felt in my life." But Ethan was already moving away, his long strides taking him back to the mansion. "Ethan, wait," she shouted, but he didn't stop. When Iris arrived at the house, she found Ethan locked in his office. She knocked on the door, begged him to let her in, but he didn't respond. It was Martha who finally approached her, her expression worried. "Girl, what happened out there?" Iris told her about the bones, but not about her confession. Some secrets were still too heavy to be shared. That night, as she put Liam to bed, the boy asked, "Mummy, why is Daddy sad?" Iris stroked his dark hair, trying to find words that a child could understand. "Sometimes adults get sad about things that happened a long time ago," she said. "But that doesn't mean he doesn't love us." "The lady in the blue dress said that Daddy hurts the people he loves," said Liam, and Iris felt her blood freeze. "She said you'll go away too, like she did." Iris pulled him closer, her heart beating erratically. "Liam, listen to me carefully. There is no lady in a blue dress. They're just nightmares, my love, and I will never leave you." Never. But even as she pronounced these words, Iris wasn't sure she could keep them. With Amanda's bones discovered, with her own confession creating a barrier between her and Ethan, and with Liam's disturbing visions, she began to wonder if she wasn't destined to repeat the tragedy that had destroyed that family years before. Amanda's bones brought an avalanche of investigators, experts, and journalists to the Sullivan mansion. The property was isolated as a crime scene, and Ethan was taken for questioning 3 times in the first week. Iris watched everything from a distance, trying to protect Liam from the chaos that had settled into their lives, while feeling the growing weight of distrust in Ethan's gaze whenever he returned from the police stations. The detective in charge of the case, a middle-aged man named Robert Santos, seemed determined to prove that Ethan had murdered his wife. 7 years ago, you couldn't prove anything, said Ethan during one of the interrogations, his voice controlled but laden with tension. What's changed now? Now we have a body, replied Santos coldly, and we have new evidence. The evidence was circumstantial but disturbing. The analysis of the bones showed signs of trauma to the skull, consistent with a fall or a blow. The blue fabric found with the mortal remains matched exactly the dress that Amanda had worn the night of her disappearance. And most damning, the broken wine bottle in the cellar contained traces of blood that belonged to the missing woman. Iris followed each development of the investigation with a heavy heart. Part of her wanted to believe in Ethan's innocence, but the evidence was difficult to ignore. Worse still, the confession she had made about her past had created a distance between them that seemed insurmountable. Ethan barely spoke to her, and when he did, it was with a cold courtesy that hurt more than any shout. It was during the second week of the investigation that the man appeared. Iris was in the garden with Liam when she saw an unknown car coming up the access road to the mansion. From it descended a man in his 40s, well-dressed, with eyes that she immediately recognized as familiar, though she didn't know why. Iris Santos, he said, approaching slowly. Or should I say, Iris Light. She instinctively pulled Liam closer, her heart racing. Who are you? My name is Daniel Wilson. I'm a lawyer, and I have information about your son. The words hit Iris like lightning. She looked around, making sure they were alone before responding. What information? Daniel smiled, but there was no warmth in the gesture. Your son is alive, as I told you on the phone. He's 13 years old. His name is Michael, and he's in an orphanage in Austin. An orphanage that curiously has been receiving generous donations from the Sullivan family for more than a decade. What do you want? Asked Iris, her voice trembling. Daniel moved closer, and she could see the cruelty in his eyes. I want justice. I see you've gotten involved with the man who killed his wife. That complicates things. He paused, studying her reaction. But perhaps we can come to an agreement. What kind of agreement? Iris knew she was treading on dangerous ground, but the mention of her son made her desperate. You testify against Ethan Sullivan. Confirm that he confessed the murder to you. In exchange, I arrange a meeting with your son. Daniel smiled again, and this time there was something sadistic in the expression. It's a very generous offer, considering you've spent 13 years looking for him. You're asking me to lie, said Iris, her voice firmer than she felt. Ethan never confessed anything to me. Daniel shrugged. Details. The important thing is that a dangerous man is taken out of circulation, and that you have the chance to recover your son. He turned to leave, but stopped. Oh, and Iris? Your son is very sick. Leukemia. The treatments are expensive. It would be a shame if he didn't receive proper care because of your misplaced loyalty. When Daniel left, Iris sat heavily on a garden bench, her legs trembling. Liam approached her, his dark eyes full of concern. Mommy, are you okay? She pulled him onto her lap, hugging him tightly. How could she choose between Liam and her biological son? How could she betray Ethan, even knowing he might be guilty? That night, she tried to talk to Ethan about Daniel's visit, but he was locked in his office again, refusing to speak to her. It was only when she began knocking on the door desperately that he finally opened. Ethan, I need to talk to you. It's about my son. What she saw on his face frightened her. There was a dark resignation in his eyes, as if he had already accepted his fate. I know about the lawyer's visit, he said, his voice without emotion. One of the employees told me. Iris entered the office, closing the door behind her. Then you know what he asked me. To testify against me in exchange for information about your son. Ethan went to the window, observing the darkness outside. And will you do it? The question came laden with a pain he tried to hide. No, said Iris immediately. I would never do that. Ethan turned to her, and for a moment she saw the mask of indifference falter. Even if it means losing the chance to find your son? Even then? Iris approached him, trying to touch his face, but he moved away. Ethan, you need to tell me the truth about what happened that night with Amanda. Because if it wasn't you, then who was it? Ethan remained silent for so long that she thought he wasn't going to answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, laden with a guilt he had carried for years. "I didn't kill Amanda," he said, "but I am responsible for her death." Iris felt her heart race. "What do you mean?" Ethan sat behind the desk as if the weight of his words was too great to bear standing. "That night after we argued, after she drove away, I called my brother, Hank. I was distraught, furious. I told him that Amanda was trying to leave me, to take Liam away. And what did Hank do? He said he would resolve the situation, that he would talk to Amanda, convince her to come back." Ethan ran his hands over his face, clearly tortured. "I didn't know what that meant. I swear I didn't know. I only discovered the truth years later, when Hank was drunk and confessed." Iris felt the air leave her lungs. "Hank killed Amanda?" "Not directly. He followed her to the road, forced her car to stop. They argued and Amanda fell, hit her head on a rock. Hank panicked, brought the body back here and buried it in the vineyard." Ethan looked at her with devastated eyes. "He said he did it to protect me, to protect the family. But I know the truth. He did it because I asked." "Ethan?" "There's more," he said, interrupting her. "The wine bottle, the one we found broken in the cellar. Hank broke it when he was moving Amanda's body. Her blood must have splashed on the bottle and he hid it there, afraid someone would discover it." Ethan stood up, walking to a drawer in the desk. From inside, he removed a sealed envelope. "This is a complete confession, signed by Hank before he died last year. Liver cancer." Iris took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why didn't you give this to the police?" "Because it would mean destroying everything our family built. Hank had children, grandchildren, and because—" he hesitated, "because I felt too guilty to redeem myself. I thought I deserved to carry this weight. And now? Now I have you and Liam to think about. And I can't live with this lie anymore." Ethan touched her face gently, the first gesture of affection he had shown in weeks. "I'm going to hand the confession to the police tomorrow. But first, I need to know, do you still love me, even knowing all this?" Iris looked into the eyes of the man she had learned to love, seeing all the pain, guilt, and vulnerability he carried. "I love you," she said, "and we'll face this together." They kissed with the desperation of two people who knew everything was about to change again, that the past had finally come to collect its debts, but that perhaps finally they could find peace in the truth. Hank's confession completely changed the course of the investigation. When Ethan delivered the document to the police, Detective Santos was forced to reopen the case from a new perspective. The evidence that previously pointed to Ethan as guilty now gained a different explanation. Hank had been the real killer, even if unintentional, and had spent years covering up the crime to protect his brother and the family. But the revelation brought unexpected consequences. The media seized on the story, turning the Sullivan mansion into a media circus. Journalists camped at the gates of the property, helicopters flew over the vineyards, and every movement of Ethan, Iris, and Liam was documented and analyzed. The weight of the exposure began to affect mainly Liam, who started having constant nightmares again and refused to leave the house. It was during this turbulence that Daniel Wilson appeared again, but this time he wasn't alone. With him was a thin 13-year-old boy with brown hair and eyes that were a young version of Iris's. "Michael," she murmured, her legs almost giving way as she recognized traces of the baby she had lost so many years ago in the face of the boy who stood before her. "Mom," said Michael, his voice still high from adolescence, carrying a vulnerability that broke Iris's heart. She ran to him, hugging him tightly, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. All the pain, lies, and tragedies of the last few months dissolved in the pure joy of finally embracing the son she had searched for so long. But Daniel hadn't brought Michael out of kindness. "As promised, I arranged the meeting," he said, his cold voice cutting through the emotion of the moment. "But there are conditions. Michael is under my temporary legal guardianship. If you want him to stay with you, you still need to testify against Ethan Sullivan." "But Hank's confession," Iris began, without releasing her son. "Is too convenient," interrupted Daniel. "A dead man confessing to a crime? Any jury would doubt that. But your word, the word of the woman who lived intimately with the suspect, that would have real weight." He smiled cruelly. "Besides, Michael needs urgent treatment. The leukemia is advancing. Iris looked at her son, noticing for the first time the paleness of his skin, the dark circles under his eyes. "How long does he have?" she asked, her voice trembling. "With proper treatment, he can live normally. Without it," Daniel shrugged. "Months, maybe a year. The treatments cost about $500,000. Money you don't have, but that I can provide." The blackmail was clear and brutal. Iris looked around searching for Ethan and found him observing the scene from the porch of the house. Even at a distance, she could see the pain on his face, not just from the threat that Daniel represented, but from the obvious joy of Iris upon finding her son. She saw the exact moment when he understood that he could lose her. "I need time to think," Iris finally said. "You have until tomorrow," replied Daniel. "After that, Michael goes back to the orphanage, and the treatments are discontinued." He turned to leave, but stopped. "Oh, and Iris, Ethan Sullivan may not have killed his wife with his own hands, but he's still a dangerous man. Do you really want to expose your son to that?" That night after Daniel and Michael departed, Daniel refused to let the boy spend the night at the mansion. Iris found herself torn between two worlds. On one side was Liam, who had become the son of her heart, and Ethan, the man she loved despite all his flaws. On the other was Michael, her biological son, sick and desperately needing her. Ethan found her in the garden, where she was sitting on the same bench where she had read Amanda's letters for the first time. "He looks like you," he said, sitting beside her. "He has your eyes." Iris didn't respond immediately, lost in thought. "Ethan, what if Daniel is right? What if you are dangerous?" The question hung in the air between them like a sharp blade. Ethan was silent for a long moment before answering. "Maybe he is. Maybe I am a man who shouldn't be near children, women I love." He looked at his own hands. "Maybe you should choose your son." "Don't say that," said Iris, turning to him. "Don't make this harder than it already is. But it's the truth, isn't it? You spent 13 years looking for Michael. He's your blood, your flesh. How can you choose between us?" The pain in Ethan's voice was palpable. "Because Liam is my son now too," replied Iris, tears running down her face. "Because this house has become my home. Because I love you in a way I don't fully understand myself." She took his hands in hers. "But Michael is dying, Ethan. How can I let him die?" It was then that Liam appeared on the porch in his pajamas, clearly having awakened from another nightmare. "Mommy," he called, his voice small in the darkness. Iris immediately stood up, running to him. "What is it, my love?" "I dreamed you were going away like the other mommy," said Liam, clinging to her. "I dreamed you were leaving me alone." Iris hugged Liam tightly, feeling her heart break. How to explain to a 6-year-old child that sometimes life forces impossible choices? How to say that maybe she really had to leave to save another son? "Liam," said Ethan, approaching slowly. "Do you remember what I said about being brave?" The boy nodded. "Sometimes being brave means letting the people we love do what they need to do, even when it's hard for us." "Are you saying Mommy is going away?" asked Liam, his eyes filling with tears. Ethan knelt at the boy's height, his own tears threatening to fall. "I'm saying that if she goes, it will be because she loves someone very much who needs her. And that doesn't mean she doesn't love us too." That night Iris remained awake, walking through the corridors of the mansion, trying to find an answer that seemed not to exist. It was when she passed by what had been Amanda's room that she noticed something strange, a faint light coming from under the door. When she opened it, she found Ethan inside, holding a photograph of his dead wife. "For you know what's most ironic?" he said without looking at her. "Amanda also had to make an impossible choice, between staying with me and helping me with my illness or leaving to protect our children." He placed the photograph back on the nightstand. "She chose to leave and died for it." "Ethan, I don't want you to make the same mistake I made with her," he said, finally looking at Iris. "I don't want my love for you to become a prison." He approached her, touching her face with infinite gentleness. "Go, Iris. Save your son. Liam and I will be fine. And if I don't want to go, if I want to find another way—" Ethan smiled, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. "Then we'll find that other way together. But first, you need to choose with your heart, not with fear." He kissed her softly, a kiss that tasted of farewell and promise at the same time. "Whatever your choice, I will love you forever." When the sun rose over the vineyards of the Sullivan mansion, Iris had already made her decision. But it was a decision that no one expected, a third option that she had found during the sleepless night. And when Daniel arrived to hear her answer, he discovered that he had completely underestimated the strength of a woman who had lost a child and found a family, who had loved deeply and was willing to fight for that love to the end. When Daniel arrived the next morning, expecting to hear Iris's surrender, he found something completely different. In the main room of the mansion, besides Iris and Ethan, there were three people he didn't expect to see. Detective Santos, a public prosecutor whom Daniel recognized from the newspapers, and an elegant woman whom he identified as being a nationally renowned lawyer. "Mr. Wilson," said Iris, her voice calm but determined, "thank you for bringing Michael yesterday. It was an unexpected gift after so many years." Daniel frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the presence of the authorities. "Iris, I hope you've made the right decision. Your son is waiting in the car." "I have made a decision," replied Iris, "but not the one you expected." She approached him holding a thick envelope. "I discovered interesting things about you, Daniel. For example, that you're not just a lawyer interested in justice. You're the son of Edward Wilson, the man who paid to have my baby taken from me 13 years ago." The color drained from Daniel's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do," intervened Detective Santos. "We spent the entire night investigating your history, Mr. Wilson. We discovered that you're keeping Michael under your guardianship illegally, using his illness as blackmail to extort money from rich families all over the country." The lawyer stood up, opening a folder full of documents. "My name is Dr. Carmen Meadows, and I represent both the Sullivan family and Iris Santos. We have sufficient evidence here to sue you for extortion, kidnapping, document falsification, and embezzlement." She smiled coldly. "Your scheme was impressive, I must admit, using sick children to blackmail desperate families." Daniel tried to back away, but the prosecutor blocked his exit. "How did it work, Wilson? You identified families with dark secrets, found vulnerable children who could serve as emotional leverage, and then orchestrated these dramatic encounters to extort money." The man who had seemed so confident the day before was now sweating profusely. "Michael really is my son," said Iris, her voice growing in strength. "We confirmed it with DNA tests that we managed to do discreetly last night. But you never had legal guardianship over him. He was in an orphanage, sick and abandoned, until you decided to use him as a piece in your dirty game." Ethan approached Daniel, his intimidating presence filling the space. "The difference between us, Wilson, is that I take responsibility for my mistakes. You, on the other hand, hide behind innocent children." His words were carefully controlled, but there was an underlying threat that made Daniel take a step back. "Where is Michael now?" asked Iris. Daniel, realizing his game was over, pointed to the car parked outside. "He's in the car, but you don't understand. He really does need treatment, and he'll receive it tenta novamente. Continua edita, and he'll receive it," said Iris firmly. "But as my son, not as your blackmail tool." As Daniel was taken away by the police, Iris ran to the car where Michael waited, clearly confused and frightened. "Mom," he said when he saw her, "what's happening?" Iris hugged him tightly, tears of relief running down her face. "You're coming home, my love, to your true home." But the real test would come when Michael met Liam. The two children studied each other cautiously at first, like animals inspecting unfamiliar territory. Liam, at 6 years old, observed the older boy with curiosity mixed with jealousy. Michael, weakened by illness and years of abandonment, seemed lost in that luxurious environment. It was Ethan who broke the ice. "Michael," he said, kneeling to be at the boy's height, "I know all this is very confusing for you, but I want you to know that this is your home now and we are your family." He looked at Liam. "Liam, this is your older brother. He's going to need us to get strong." "Is he sick?" asked Liam with the brutal honesty of children. "Yes," replied Iris, "but we're going to take care of him together and he'll be fine." Liam approached Michael and, with a gesture that made Iris's heart tighten, offered his favorite toy, the small wooden horse he had given to Iris on the first day. "This is my magic horse," he said. "It protects me from nightmares. Now it can protect you too." The months that followed were of adaptation and healing. Michael began treatment for leukemia at one of the best hospitals in Austin, financed by the resources that Ethan had set aside for family emergencies. The chemotherapy sessions were difficult, but having a real family, not just Iris, but also Ethan and Liam, gave the boy a strength he had never known. Ethan surprised everyone, including himself, with his ability to be a father to two such different boys. With Liam, he maintained the tenderness that had always existed. With Michael, he developed an almost infinite patience, helping the teenager navigate not only through the disease, but also through the emotional complexities of finally having a family. The Sullivan mansion began to echo with sounds that hadn't been heard for decades. The laughter of two children playing together, animated conversations during dinner, the noise of feet running through the corridors. Iris observed it all with a contentment she had never imagined possible. One night, 6 months after Michael's arrival, Iris found Ethan on the porch watching the boys play in the garden under the golden light of dusk. Michael was visibly stronger, his hair beginning to grow back after chemotherapy, while Liam was teaching him how to care for the flowers that Iris had planted. "You know what's most amazing?" said Ethan, putting his arm around her waist. "For years I thought this house was haunted by the ghosts of the past, but now I realize it was just waiting for the right family to bring it back to life." "And you?" asked Iris, resting her head on his shoulder. "Have you also come back to life?" Ethan kissed her softly on the top of her head. "I learned that sometimes we need to go through hell to find paradise. And that true love isn't about being with someone perfect, but about finding someone who accepts us with all our flaws and still chooses to stay." 3 years later, in a simple ceremony in the vineyards of the Sullivan mansion, Iris and Ethan were officially married. Michael, now 16 and in complete remission, was the one who walked Iris down the aisle. Liam, at 9 years old, was the ring-bearer. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends, but it was filled with a genuine joy that contrasted drastically with the dark days they had lived. During the party, while watching her 2 sons dancing together, Iris reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her there. She had begun as a desperate housekeeper, lost in her own pain, and had become the matriarch of a family that had been built not on lies or convenience, but on true love, forgiveness, and the courage to face the past. Ethan approached her, extending his hand. "May I have this dance, my wife?" Iris smiled, accepting his hand. As they danced among the vines that had witnessed so much suffering and now celebrated so much love, she knew that she had finally found her place in the world, not as a substitute for someone who had been lost, but as herself, Iris Santos Sullivan, a woman who had learned that sometimes the strongest families are those that form through scars, not despite them. And when the moon rose over the vineyards that night, illuminating the mansion that now breathed with life and laughter, the ghosts of the past finally found peace, knowing that love had won where vengeance and fear had failed. The Sullivan family had found its redemption, and Iris had found not only her sons but herself.